Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sage's webinar all about payroll. So we're just going to give our attendees a few extra seconds where I can see the numbers buzzing up. And considering it's the end of January, I'm amazed we've got over 900 registrations for this webinar, which just goes to show when you've got a bit of legislation and especially payroll, everyone wants to hear the latest. So the numbers are zooming up really quickly, but because we've got so much content, let's try and make a start. So again, hello everyone, and welcome to Sage's webinar all about payroll strategies for financial year 2025. Because over the next hour, we're going to be guiding you through the most significant payroll and compliance changes which will be coming into place from this April. It's all about how as businesses you can prepare, because like everything, there are always going to be last minute disruptions. But also when you got, let's say, increasing or even changes in the employer's national insurance, plus also factors around national minimum wage, and also there is rising costs, plus also the changes in new reporting obligations. It's so important that we really understand what these rules mean, but also more importantly, how we prepare for it, and also how we communicate these things to our clients if we're doing payroll bureau or actually doing our own payroll, really understanding what we need to do. Because when you think about payroll, it's not just about what we're doing, it's extending that knowledge to our payroll teams, talking about other business leaders and also business owners. Because obviously when you think about most businesses, salary costs, people costs are probably the most significant item on the profit and loss account. And therefore understanding the dynamics of those costs, especially when you've got changes in terms of threshold, is really important, especially when we've got some big changes coming to head. Plus also that little subject of payrolling benefits in kind coming from April 2026. So a little bit of housekeeping. So as you may see on the right hand side of your screen, you've got the option to actually ask some questions, and this is an interactive webinar. So we're going to hopefully cover much we can do. We've got the experts here, so hopefully the technical stuff will be well covered. But if you've got any queries, please drop them in the Q&A. We'll have some time towards the end and we'll do our best to answer some of those queries. If there's things we get stuck upon, we'll put them to one side and may end up doing a blog or something to cover those elements. This webinar is live, it's going to be recorded, so therefore sit back, listen, enjoy, and you'll be able to watch it back in your own leisure at some point over the weekend if you choose to do so. So let's kick off. So my name's Chris Downing, I'm the Director for Accounts and Bookkeepers here at Sage. I've been at Sage 6.5 years, but prior to that I was an accountant by trade for nearly 20 years. So I actually sat opposite the payroll department, so I was regularly interacting with them and understanding, let's say, the ebbs and flows, the challenges of getting client information, but also when there was a legislation changes, what that means. I'm also, let's say, young enough or old enough to even remember the manual style of payroll. I was exposed to payroll back in the late 1990s, so the big analysis pads, looking through the tables, and you just think of how payroll's changed over the years. It's gone from manual to technology, but also think of how do we make our lives easier. So it's not just about me, I'm presenting this webinar, I'm joined by some of the experts here. So I've got Sarah Smith here from the Chartered Institute of Payroll Professionals. Sarah, a little bit of intro yourself and background.
Thank you, Chris. So I currently work for the CIPP and I have done for the last 12 months as part of the policy team, which is a fantastic privilege, especially after being in the payroll world for probably about 15, 16 years. Done a bit of everything, mainly in-house, but also bureau environments as well. And we'll be honest, I'm sure every payroll professional can say two things. One, they fell into payroll, and two, that they've used Sage software somewhere along the line.
Yeah, and that's the whole point. Sage has been around for ages around payroll in terms of special software. And when we talk about software, Steve, this is your intro, isn't it? Bit of background to you, please.
Hi everybody, I'm Steve Watmore. I'm a product manager in payroll and HR at Sage. Yeah, I've been in payroll for, it was my 27th anniversary at Sage on Sunday, and I've been in payroll the whole time. Yes, I stumbled into payroll. I thought I was joining to talk about accounts, and I learned payroll and lived it and loved it. I'm fortunate enough to spend a lot of time with customers, either people who do payrolls for their own business or people who do it professionally as a bureau and accountancy service. And I've been lucky enough to work with lots of people over the years, meeting them at Accountex and CIPP events as well. And yeah, I'm passionate about really elevating payroll and also really making a bit of noise about how hard it is to get it right. The fact we get it right all the time, you guys, is amazing, but it's really difficult. And sessions like this are really important for us to kind of 4-1-4 plan. So yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you very much, Steve. And like everything, your passion and your expertise always showcases when you're talking about payroll, but also it demonstrates the fact that payroll is a complicated service, an incredibly valuable service. People want to get paid on time, they want it to be accurate, but also if actually payroll has been part and parcel of, let's say, that whole HR service as well, and we'll explore that going forward. So let's kick off with the first section, because when we think about, let's say, some of the biggest payroll changes coming in from April 2025, it's a case of the fact that the biggest one is basically the change in the national insurance threshold. Now, what's happening is someone's affecting, I've got a TV screen here. There we go, switched it off. There's another remote control. So one of the biggest changes is the change in the employer's national insurance. And therefore, from April 2025, the secondary threshold is going to be dropping from £9,500 to £5,000 a year. So this is really, as you know, the rate, the point at which employers' national insurance is actually charged. But also the rate is changing as well. It's increasing from 13.8% to 15%. So this is going to be a significant cost impact. So this will mean more businesses will be paying national insurance, employers' national insurance for the very first time. But also it's understanding which employees this will be affected as well, because those who were, let's say, just earning £8,000 a year will actually now be affected, which also means actually what does this mean to the business? So really, for, let's say, every employee earning above £5,000 a year, employers will now have to be paying like £615 per worker per annum, which is obviously an extra cost which they weren't expecting until the Chancellor announced it last October. But also in terms of, let's say, how does it affect cash flow? It's not just the overall cost, it's also managing that cash outflow on a monthly basis. So therefore, how are businesses responding? Now, I suspect there was an awful lot of conversations, a lot of interaction in the first couple of weeks in November. People may have paused and, let's say, refocused on different things, but actually what we need to do is make sure that conversation is still ongoing, because what we don't want to do is basically have a few surprise conversations in April and May when our clients are then thinking, well, how do these rates change? What do we need to do? And also, more importantly, what are the future cash flow outflows for this? So, Sarah, I think there was an awful lot of discussion about is this an extra cost to businesses or not? But also what industries are going to be affected, because I suspect people who are part-time or in hospitality, they're going to be affected more than ever. So what was the general vibe when the news landed in November?
It is a tough one. I mean, a lot of small employers are going to be affected, and like you said, there are certain industries that will be hit harder. And like you said, it feels like it's a double whammy, isn't it? Now, obviously, 2 days ago, there was a release that they're changing the reclaim for statutory payments. So small businesses, they can actually claim now 108.5% of statutory payments. So I think the government, that shows me the government are actually well aware that these changes haven't quite been received as expected or wanted, shall we say. So they are looking at other ways of releasing some of the pressure. And obviously we've got the employment allowance changes as well, which is new for people. So that's also something that people need to be taking into account and making sure that they actually do look at that and apply for that as well, because a lot of people didn't apply for that previously because of the threshold. So there are lots of things to take into consideration.
Now, Steve, some people say, well, not another change to payroll, because obviously when there are changes to legislation, it's a case of scratch head. Is this an easy amendment to making software? Is this completely brand new? It's the transition and the awareness. But also it's a case of when you think about the tens of thousands of businesses which we support on payroll, we've probably got an awful lot of calls and help. We had sent out the blog posts, etc. What was the general theme and vibe, and what sort of calls have we been getting? And actually, are businesses feeling that actually we're supporting them or giving the right sort of reports to plan ahead for this?
So when this was announced, and whenever there's a budget, there's an uplift in questions about what are you going to do, what's coming in, and if you use the Sage website, the Sage blogs, we've got lots of responses quickly. We always try to respond quickly to say what we've heard, how we're going to approach it, and how we're going to keep people informed. But this one was we went a little bit further than normal for a lot of our customers, especially in the 50 payroll products. Is we actually produced a report that shows you, if you ran a period that you've already done, what that would have looked like in the new year. And part of the importance of this is about communication. When you said, is it complicated? It's not complicated. It's a percentage change and a rate change. So there's no activity to make it work in your software. The softwares will do that. Whichever payroll you'll use will work this out. But the communication of where you've now got employees that previously didn't have national insurance, like you've mentioned about cost, but there's also going to be conversations with employees, because they'll have pay slips with items on that you wouldn't have seen before, or they wouldn't have seen before. And we want to really help employers be able to explain that simply and easily to the employees. It's not incorrect. It's not supposed to be there, but there's still a change. So therefore, communication is important. So we created this report that will show you, if you run it, say I've run a copy just before that, ran it for December's payroll, and it shows employees' differences where the employer national insurance has changed, but it also flags employees that previously wouldn't have paid any national insurance. Not that their NI has just gone up by the rate, but wouldn't have been there. And tools like that will really help you work out who's going to have the conversation, who you're going to have a conversation with. Explaining a couple of percentage point increase to an employee is fairly easy. Most employees will know that. They know that their employer, or it's on the employer side anyway, national insurance goes up and down depending on earnings, etc. And if you're already seeing national insurance on your payslip, you're used to it. But if you've not had that line before, it's a commentary point. So it's very much a case of watching this, and we are hearing more and more, and every day really, because again this morning I was listening to the news and it was very much in the news about people talking about the changes of the government. Has it had an effect? What's coming? So awareness is really building towards payroll year end, but we want to make sure that customers and yourself are able to speak to your clients and prep really now, because the conversations are easier now than when there's a reactive point.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, having those reports, because let's be honest, we're in January and we'll just be focused on what happened in December. And with a lot of businesses being seasonal, sort of taking on extra staff, it's a case of, when planning ahead for next year, it's a case all very well understanding what the month of April will look like, but actually what will it look like next December? What things do I need to manage in terms of cash flows? Having that granularity of let's reporting certainly makes our life a little bit easier and gives that confidence what to do next.
And that, Chris, we did that very specifically so you can run it for you can specify the months, like you just said, is if you've got a worrying or a peak month or a seasonality month, you can run it against that and it'll say this is what it's going to look like, not just your current month. So yeah, absolutely.
Now we have touched upon the fact that part of, let's say, the change in the employer's national insurance percentages, there was also another change, which was the increase in the employment allowance, and this has increased from £5,000 to £10,500. But also it's actually increasing the scope of those businesses who are eligible, because before there was a cap up to just £100,000 in terms of the total employer's national insurance liability. That cap has now been removed, which is obviously opening up to those larger businesses. But also it probably eases off, let's say, that additional cost, those smaller businesses, because yeah, okay, every business is slightly different, but some of the calculations are if you employ maybe 5 or 6 people, you're probably not going to be too affected by the changes in rates, because the increase in the employment allowance will possibly cover that additional employer's national insurance. But again, I think what this does raise is, as Sarah, as you said, more people may be applying for it. One, they didn't know it exists, but also thinking about doing so. But also actually just focusing on the rules in terms of actually which businesses can claim. We are in a situation where you've got small groups, associated companies, who can claim what, not double claiming it. And then also the fact that UK PLC is made up of an awful lot of single individual, small limited companies, and whether those sole directors can claim it or no. And therefore there are even conversations I can hear on the social media about, oh, employer, a member of the family, etc. There was so many conversations in terms of what can I do to claim this allowance. So again, I think it comes down to what should people be doing in terms of making sure they're doing it right, what can they claim for, but also in terms of what they can get from the software just to validate what they're doing. So Sarah, is there like an eligibility tracker? Sorry, that's not coming out very well. But what can employers do to actually make sure they're claiming the right amount?
So obviously gov.uk, they do provide good guidance for every type of scenario. So it gives clearly who can apply, when you can't, and how to apply. And we're also very mindful supporting the industry as well, because sometimes it isn't always that clear to everybody. So we're particularly focusing on some of these changes now with regards to our communications and our news online. Obviously our news online is available to everybody. So we are trying to assist the profession by educating, like you said, with the pay slips. It's all about education and understanding, because, you know, especially people that don't particularly look at their pay slips, or people, busy payroll professionals, it's always easy for us to say, well, it's just this or it's just that, but it is people. So it's all about education, and we're working hard to ensure that that's there and easily accessible in one place, where you can see who is entitled to what, and how to claim it as well, because we don't want people getting to that point and thinking, oh, it's too hard, I don't know, and not claiming what they're entitled to.
Now, Steve, I can remember when the employer's allowance was first come in several years ago, and it's grown over the years, and now we've got this quite nice hefty sum come through. What sort of challenges have you seen in terms of maybe support calls, or maybe where people actually make errors or even not claim for it? Is it something as simple as, let's say, make sure you're clicking the right buttons in the payroll software, or is there anything else which they need to be mindful about?
To be honest, Chris, for most software, that's it, is have I done the right thing? Have I set the system up so it makes that calculation and shows against your P32, your allowance report. Being aware, gov.uk is always the source of the truth for these things, making sure that if you've got any processes to go through to claim, you've gone through that. But also being aware that if you've missed anything, you can go back and do it. It's not, there are certain rules and certain processes when you sign up. If you miss a deadline, you're out for a year. The employment allowance is not at all. And we've worked with quite a lot of professional companies who've had clients that they've taken over where the client wasn't aware of it, and claiming for it, and they've been able to go back over several years, and it does make a difference. It's really important that where there are allowances, Sarah's mentioned the small employers relief, any of those, they all contribute. So it's really a case of following your guidance from your providers and your support materials. So one of the things that should be in your payroll year-end planning, whoever you're supported by, will tell you about the steps and the things you need to do. The important thing about employment allowance, which did change a couple of years ago, is it used to auto roll forward, and then the rules were changed to make sure that you have to effectively apply again every year. It's not complicated, it's not lots of work, but if you don't do it, it can cause a bit of to and fro around your P32 report. But I'd say, don't worry if you've missed it, or actually take the opportunity to say, did we get it all last year? Because going back and reapplying is really important. They're there very much to support the small business community. I know it's moved now into the bigger companies, but really in this change where there's going to be more national insurance charge for employees that wouldn't previously pay, that change is really to help offset that. So yeah, just register, but dig through your software and support materials. Whoever you're with, Sage are great at this, but they might not be your provider, should have some really clear information on how to do it, and mainly they'll direct you to gov.uk for the rules about how to apply.
So I'm a big fan of maybe dealing with Q&A in the moment, and the Q&A has not say blown up, but there's certainly a lot of questions which have come in. So what I'd probably best if I deal with these now rather than leave them to the end, because it probably makes sense. So the easy ones, yes, this is recorded, you'll be able to see it on demand. But I think the key things in terms of, let's say, product. So Steve, that report we were talking about, that's in Sage 50 payroll, isn't it? It's not available in the Sage Cloud solution.
Unfortunately, it's not got the same historical reporting that because we've got a report designer in 50 payroll, we built it specifically as a bit of an ad hoc. It's something we are looking forward to changing how that defines, but the quick response was just in the 50 payroll right now. If you want to know how to get it, on the home page of your 50 payroll, there's a really big tile that says all about it, how to learn more and how to get the report.
And you just answered another couple of questions there as well. Brilliant. So if I just scroll up again, that's a report. The report sorted, lots of questions about the report, brilliant. EPS, that's fun. So therefore, and Sarah, here's a good question, because I think this comes up quite often. So is the employer's allowance claimable for a single director payroll? Are they still exempt?
That hasn't changed.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then here's a comment, is that the guidance about EA is not clear on the government website. So where can people get to let's say more clarity, or maybe in plain English, this guidance? I suppose Steve will say we've got some great blogs on this, but Sarah, from your point of view, where do you usually go to, let's say, to get the right guidance on these things?
Well, as I said, we are concentrating on this at the minute, and year-end activities and going into the new year. If you keep an eye out on the news page on the CIPP, cipp.co.uk, look on the news page there. We update daily, and we tend to put things as clear as possible and in plain English. And of course, we do always have our advisory service as well, that's a fantastic team that answer the questions there. That's probably, I'd say, my go-to at the minute. That's where you can catch things in plain English, because yeah, it's not legislation, but gov.uk can be a bit frustrating to navigate for some people, I think.
And just still on EA, and there's a question about group companies. So effectively, what's happening in the employment allowance for group companies? Can they all claim it now, or is it still restricted to a single company?
Yeah, that hasn't changed either.
Steve, people are asking, what is this report called in Sage 50? Because I suppose I'll go into Sage Help and Search report. What's its name? And as Steve is, let's say, just validating the name of it.
Yeah, I'll just go into it. It's open online. It's called Employer NI Cost Indications Report. But as I say, if you've got a 50 payroll program, you've got the homepage that tells you all about webinars and things like that. It's right at the top. There's a big banner that says help to prepare your clients, or help to prepare for the NI changes if you're a DIY customer. And there's a link in there how to download it and how to get it going. So just use the homepage. The homepage is going to be your lifeline throughout year end and going forward. So it's all in there. But it's and if you say you've always got contact methods to Sage for support. But as I say, your homepage is your starting place, and it's right at the top. It's quite literally unmissable.
And again, I think we've really sparked that whole group question, the 100K. So basically, the question is, our employers' national insurance is over 100K. We couldn't claim for it previously. Can we claim for it now? Well, the answer is yes, isn't it? And that's the whole point, is that threshold, that ceiling has now disappeared. But also, it's really important to be looking at groups, because it's literally one entity and not the individual entities in it. Again, what we're possibly seeing is the fact that where you may have people employed in various group entities in terms of how they may be employed going forward. So like everything, focus, look at the restructuring, and also, is it really worth it to go through all that hassle of restructuring when you look at the numbers involved? Right, just quickly go through the other questions, because I think it'd be useful to capture at the same time. They're pretty much all the similar themes. Fine, let's move on.
Can I just jump in? One response, Chris, which was around if you're finding any of the material confusing, we recommend obviously gov.uk, but come to your suppliers, because there'll be a huge amount of content. Sage is famed for its support and its content. But also, if the content doesn't help or you want it changing, give us feedback, because like also some of the big suppliers through CIPP and ourselves, we can influence Gov in terms of how their materials, and we feedback as well. So really, if the materials on there aren't good enough, feedback on the materials online at gov.uk, because they are responsive. But use your suppliers as well, because we do have an ear to the ground on this, and we do like to make sure that the source of the material is always as clear for everybody.
And I think that's an excellent point. The whole point is we do our best to give the right information and guidance. If it's not ticking the boxes for you, contact us, tell us, whether it's by web chat, by email, or just pick up the phone and have a conversation, and basically every call gets logged. And this is where the AI in the background is picking it all up, just to make sure there's nothing being missed. So please just contact us. So that's what came out from the budget, but there's been things bubbling in the background for quite some time, and they're not disappearing. because when we think about April 2025, it's not about the legislation changes that we know. We also need to be thinking of another 12 months in advance. So from April 2026, and this is still what's been planned to happen, and we all know that HMRC can roll back their plans at some stage, is effectively from April 2026, benefits in kind will now be reported through payroll. Well, pretty much all of them. I think some things which may be excluded are probably director's loan accounts, overdrawn director's loan account, a few other themes, but pretty much everything else. So you've got health insurance or those other benefits, they will now be actually all cars. They'll now be charged and actually reported through monthly payroll, which is going to be a massive change, because I don't know about you, I think it does vary from one payroll bureau to department and one other accounting firm as well, because sometimes P11Ds are dealt with by a department which isn't payroll. That's either the tax department or general practice. And now suddenly, as payroll departments, you need more information. And I don't know about you, getting information from the clients is the biggest challenge. Now we need to get information more than just about what the employees should be paid, but maybe what other benefits are being paid out. So obviously this is going to bring an awful lot of change to businesses in terms of what their cost structures are going to be doing, what information they need to record, but also in terms of maybe that whole remuneration package which they may be offering. So again, Sarah, how much planning has been going on already? And actually, do you think how well aware are business owners and also payroll departments in terms of what they need to do to get ready going forward? Do you think it's a case of we've just been dealing with month-on-month themes, and now we really need to think about dropping that conversation in before the next couple of months?
If I'm honest, myself, I think it's something that's been on the cards for a long time, and it was always coming, and it will come. It is a concern for some businesses. Some businesses won't have as many issues. Some people may take, well, it's simple enough. I can't emphasize enough the importance of planning and information. From personal experience, I've been in an environment where the data was just no good. I wanted to introduce payroll and benefits at the time, but you just couldn't rely on the data. Not all the data was in the system. Not all payroll systems are capable of holding that relevant data at the minute. And I know there are a lot of software providers that are going through the mill at the minute with getting it all right and how things are going to work. But for payroll professionals, definitely you need to take into account what benefits you have, what's in your system, whether you choose to go early and register for the next tax year and register for April 25, or you are waiting for the mandation in 26, just make sure you're prepared. Make sure you have all that data and it is correct. Quite often you'll get companies where your fleet management are not communicating in a timely manner, and you'll see the CEO or whoever driving past in a brand new car, and all you can think as a payroll professional is, well, I didn't know about that. That's not updated in my world. But it needs to be in a timely manner, and there are also a lot of PMI companies that don't provide the updates in a timely manner, which all well and good when your P11Ds at the end of the year and you have time to collect that, but it's time to think now about where is my data stored, how relevant is it, and having those conversations with the providers of how timely that information is going to be coming across, because being organised and prepared, I can't stress enough, is imperative for this process.
And Steve, from your point of view, though I think HMRC haven't provided clarity in terms of the detail of this, whether about amendments or actually how it should be structured, we just know it's happening. So it's almost a case of we're building with a fair idea, but also building, speaking to payroll bureaus in terms of how it should be operating, the challenges they face. What sort of insights have you gathered so far? And also, more importantly, what is Sage going to be doing to make this as easier for people as well?
So if you're a 50 payroll customer, if you're a bureau software customer, from tomorrow, you're on the homepage, back to the homepage again. there'll be a questionnaire going in about payroll and benefits in kind in general, which is about gathering a bit of information about how people do it now, if they do it now, what they know and what they don't know, to make sure that where we look at solutions, because we have multiple payroll products, we do have a P11D software that will become less useful as a standalone tool going forward. But there's a lot to learn, and from a payroll point of view, you talked really early on, Chris, about anecdotally knowing how to do a manual calc or a tax calc. This is new calculations for some payrolls. They won't know how to work out the benefit in kind to put through a payroll. It's not just put through a value and it works it out. You have to get to that value in the first place, and that's what P11D software does. Car calculations, van calculations, etc., can be complicated. Some of them are quite simple. The linear, it's £1,000 a year, so it's £85 a month to put it through. But starters, levers, proratas, there's lots to do. So really, firstly, as a payroll professional, really look into this. Invest some time now, even if it's because it's going to be a year down the line, in training and understanding, because it will, if you put it into practice well, will be a really well-trodden path. If it's not, it will be very difficult, because you'll be forever playing catch up. And you may have to be stronger with some of your suppliers of data. The deadlines are deadlines, and if you miss that, they have to deal with the outpourings of that, because it is problematic. But from a product point of view, I say we've got a lot of history in P11D and benefits after, but it is a lot easier after the event. Once all the materials, once the deadline's gone and all the calcs are done, it's quite easy. Going forward, it's going to be difficult or different, and we're looking at how we transform that and make it simple. There will be a lot more information that has to go into payroll, like Sarah's mentioned. So even if you register and do payroll and benefits this year, it actually will change quite a bit next year, because you'll have to store information about individual benefit types rather than just a cumulative value goes through your P11D, through your FBS. And so it's really, we're going to be on the front foot. We're going to be doing a lot. You're going to hear from us a lot this year about payroll and benefits as we go forward. Again, use your software and your materials, because, and it's not just about bureaus and accountants. If you're a company, a payroll within a company, you might have to think about, are the benefit types that you've got now pertinent? Are they the best way forward? And it's not about changing your remuneration package, or it might be. You've got to look at, are you doing it for the right reasons? What we don't want to see this drive is benefits taken away from employees that would have been useful, as long as they're supported by the equivalent cash response. But that then means that the employee might have to go out and source their own medical insurance or source things. And those conversations are something that you have to think about as a business. So we're going to do a lot around education. We're going to do a lot about enablement and making it easy. But there is a lot out there for you to start looking at now as well.
Yeah, so again, the questions are just blown up on the screen, but the general themes are, will we be able to do monthly disclosure of benefits in kind through Sage Payroll? And the answer is yes, Steve, isn't it? That's the whole point.
It'll be required as part of the FBS by direct. There might be a slight tweak on where you haven't got every detail of everything. If you do payroll and benefits now, which has been around for years, the FBS already contains it, but it's a little bit. Going forward, it's going to contain a lot more. So the amount of information you'll have to put in will be significantly increased.
And then also people saying, will we be doing demos? Will we be doing more webinars? Will we be delivering advice? Can they play with it? It's all about yes, yes, and yes. But we're actually just waiting for HMRC to actually provide clarity on the actual detail before we can actually showcase what this will look like and actually how you can plan for it. And do you have any indication when this may be available from HMRC's side? But also, more importantly, once that's available, we will be delivering as much content as we can to help you.
Yeah, I mean, from a go live, it doesn't go live until the 6th of April. So it'll be in the payroll year-end release next year for 50, and similar for our cloud payroll. In terms of how we show it and what we've got, as soon as we get to the point where we can show our customers a working product or an idea, we'll start sharing that, because we want to get feedback on it. This will be a collaborative approach, which is what we always do with releases. I think that from my perspective is I wouldn't worry too much about the software and the mechanics, because the mechanics and the software will probably be very similar for many. Right now you have tick boxes for benefit in kind payment elements. They'll be similar, but you might have to add a bit more information in about the nature of the benefit, etc. What I would really recommend for users right now is look at your company, look at the type of benefits you've got, and also look at what you're planning on doing over the next 2 to 3 years, because it might not be a next year thing for you, it might be down the line. And certain benefits will be generally really, really easy to administrate. And they are quite the most common ones, which are things like medical insurance and things with a yearly premium. But outside that, if you've got some that are relative to your industry and quite specific, they can be quite complicated to get through over the line. So really look at that. But as I say, if you're part of our community, there'll be a lot of opportunity for insight and review. So watch your homepage. I'm going to keep pushing the homepage today, but watch your homepage and watch your community spaces. We'll be updating a lot throughout this year. Probably get payroll year and out of the way for now, because we know you guys are all busy and it's kind of coming up. But as soon as we're through that, we'll be really banging the drum of this.
So I can remember the good old days. Obviously, I was sat opposite the payroll department, and the payroll year end was a bit of a nightmare, because you're either doing, let's say, annual payroll, just catching up, validating, and also the RTI. It seemed to sort of disappear and be easier. But actually, we cannot ignore there's some real important themes around actually planning for payroll year end, improving it, reviewing it, communicating with your clients, and also more importantly, it's a really good time to actually, let's say, review what work's been performed, what work could be performed, and are we actually charging enough for these services? So I think, Steve, you've probably done lots of webinars in terms of, let's say, payroll year end and best practices, but what sort of themes should people be looking at and focusing on to get right before the year end?
Thanks, Chris. When you say I've been on a lot, yes, I've been around a while, so thanks for that. The good thing is, we often talk about payroll year end as month 12 now. RTI changed the reporting line a lot, but it's still a point in time. It's still a reflection point, and also it's also a setup point, like we talked about employment allowance and resetting. We know payroll professionals are great at the roles. We know they're on top of things, and it's not a panic. It's not complete change, but it is a reset point, and it is also an opportunity. It's an opportunity for a bit of housekeeping, because quite often, depending on your software, you might have redundant employees now, you might have historical information on there you don't need to see. There might be a GDPR review where you've got too much data that you don't need anymore. Or there might be just things, and I talk about this in the 50 payroll line, where you've got 30 pay elements you haven't used for a year, so maybe you need to take them out. But the important thing is really plan now. If you've got weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly payroll, have you got a week 53? It's on there, but just check it, because it's different. It creates a different form. A P800 comes in about tax, and there's a conversation around that. If you haven't got one, great, but if you have, plan for it now. The other things are, think about the allowances going forward. If you haven't claimed for them this year already, get doing them. I just had a quick look while we were chatting before, and I think it lets you claim up to 4 years back for the employment allowance. So if you haven't done it, get on top of that. And then look at your provider for knowledge and information about what's coming. There's a couple of things we haven't talked about in the legislation that's coming in the new year. We've not gone into every detail, but there'll be loads of content, loads of webinars. Sage do payroll year-end webinars like every 2 or 3 a week throughout the time, and they'll be covering things like neonatal care, which is quite a big thing from this new year. So if you've got, if you're unfortunate enough to have a child that's required neonatal care, fortunately the government's going to allow you to take additional paid leave before maternity and paternity leave kick in. Something to be really pleased by. I think it's a great step forward, but it is new. So look for that from your providers. There's lots of free resources out there as well. If you're not a Sage customer, that's fine. Our resources are there for you. Go and have a read, learn. So it's really just about that prep. And then the usual things. February time, so later this month, all the tax code notifications will be appearing from HMRC. So go on, download them using 50 payroll, automatically download them, and they'll just wait for you, but be aware. And then it's just the conversations, the cleanup. People have left. We take a huge amount of calls of, should I give this person a P60? If they're not employed on the 5th of April, don't give them a P60. I know it's really simple, but write that down, write it in a big post-it note. And then that helps if you get in a conversation with an employee that left, and then in April they ring you and say, where's my P60? It's like, you're not supposed to get one. So it's the same as usual. And if you go through it in a checklist way, it's fairly smooth. But again, if you're hitting a bump and something you want to reflect that you've done this year that you don't think is quite right, use your providers. They're great at payroll year ends. Sage are outstanding at, but payroll providers and payroll software support companies know year end really well. So look for the materials, because if you can't find it, it's probably not a real question. If it's a real question, you'll probably have an answer for it out there.
Thank you, Steve. That's a really good answer. This is why it's recorded, so you can play that back. Sarah, is there anything else you would add to this? Because I think obviously the payroll year end is a really good sense check. Is everything happening as intended? It's a case of you've been paying Jane, but actually have you been paying John the right amount? Is salary sacrifice operating as appropriate? Are we actually fulfilling the national minimum wage criteria? Because obviously with salary sacrifice, etc. And this is probably why the government was going to introduce, let's say, the reporting of, let's say, hours in payroll. That's now been pushed back for some time, just almost to give that sort of validation in terms of doing that calculation of hours worked, how much being paid. Does that sort of fit in with the national minimum wage calculations? Is there anything else we should be thinking about at this sort of important time?
So a few things there. The hours work that you just referenced that has been pushed back previously has actually been scrapped altogether now. The government are not taking that forward. They've listened to feedback and potentially what that could put on departments, but we won't go there. Also loved your reference to providing the P60s, Steve. It's not been that long since I've been out of operational payroll, but that did bring back a fond memory of how many questions you get about that. And yes, that did make me smile. So with regards to end of year, I think one thing that's quite often overlooked is directors NI. I mean, obviously, not going to go into the nitty gritty, but it's quite surprising how many people are actually unaware of the two different methods of the employer's NI and the need for that reconciliation at the end of the year. So again, that's something you can look up on gov.uk, and we also provide details on that on CIPP as well. But that is one definitely to keep an eye on. As you mentioned as well, the national minimum wage. With the minimum wage increasing the way it is, obviously there's a lot to take into consideration with salary sacrifices, and Low Pay Commission's report recently actually highlighted some of the biggest mistakes and the common mistakes that are so very easy to make. So it's worth having a little look into that and giving yourself a reminder, because quite often, you know, minimum wage is such a complex thing. You think it's, you know, it's this many hours times this much per hour, simple. And the more you look into it, the more you realise how complicated it is. But even beyond the complex calculations and things in the background, it's simple things like deductions for equipment and uniform. Not everybody's aware that these things do actually make a difference. And the one that I didn't actually realise for a long time and almost caught me out was the court orders. So that's one thing I always remind people, because obviously court orders, it's a statutory requirement, but where you got the £1 fee, the admin fee, that's not a statutory requirement. And if you actually take that £1 fee, you could actually be in breach of national minimum wage. And it's something so simple that £1 could make a difference. So it makes you realise then how many things you actually have to consider. And year end as a whole is a lot more pleasant these days, because the software kind of does it for you, and it's not as scary as it used to be. Less sleepless nights.
Brilliant, that's great. So really it's a case of what should we be doing? I think the key thing is communicate, because it's a case of, one, it's explaining to clients the changes in legislation, and there are obviously a lot of them, but also reminding them, because some of these themes have been around for quite some time. We just seem to have forgot about it, and therefore it's only when a mistake has happened or an error that we realise that we maybe have to tighten up on some processes. Inevitably, there are going to be some increasing tax liabilities, and therefore having a good understanding what these could be, informing clients in terms of what they are, when they fall due, and also thinking about how this fits into general business planning is really important to have that sort of forecast. Even if it's a simple back of a napkin type calculation, at least they have an understanding what's going to happen. It's so important. It's also a case of just making sure that employers are really understanding the changes in national minimum wages, how that affects different age groups, when that's going to fall in due, but also in terms of that gives an understanding in terms of when they look at their normal annual salary increases, what implications that's going to have in terms of the general remuneration package and the cost of the business. But also it's a case of what best practices have we got today for collecting records from the client? Because whatever we've got in process today, it needs to be better, because from April 26, with benefits in kind being payrolled, we will be asking for more information from the employer. And it's challenging enough to get that core information, which we know. To get those sort of other themes, which could be from, let's say, the bookkeeping solution, it's going to be a bit more challenging. But also, it's just advocating value. If the business can understand what we're doing and the fact that payroll is not just complex, it is also complicated, it's making sure, are you charging your services appropriately? So Sarah, from your point of view, we talk about communication with clients is so important. What do you think works best? Because we almost need to do several routes. It's not just the conversation, because the employers can sometimes forget, oh, I don't recall that conversation. It's actually emails, it's newsletters, it's content on the website. It's almost a case of we need to actually tick every interaction and making sure we're covering ourselves in terms of that information flow. What sort of works best, do you think, sometimes?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because we all know, we always recommend, if there's something major, a change that's come in, payslip messaging is a fantastic tool to get. You know, everybody gets one, obviously, and simple way of reducing potential queries. However, how many people actually read their payslips? That's a worrying stat, if I'm honest. Chris, you look really guilty. You don't read your payslip, do you? Don't tell that to payroll people ever. No, I've given people letters and they've just turned around and just thrown them in the bin as I've left the room. I mean, it is difficult to get your messages across. That is one that I would always say and encourage. But it's keeping those lines of communication open and trying everything. And to be honest, these days, the most effective form of communication and catching people's attention seems to be social media, because that's one thing people do actually pay attention to. And simple things like directing people in the right places as well. So a lot of queries into payroll departments now are all around tax codes and simple things like national insurance numbers and things like that. So then refer them to the HMRC app, really handy to download, got everything there. So I find the easier it is for people, the less likely they are to throw that letter in the bin or disregard. But these days, with attention spans dropping, it is a lot harder to get the attention.
So Steve, if we hear that social media is a good way of communicating, are we going to be seeing you do some TikToks or something soon? But with that said, this probably goes quite nicely in terms of what Sage have done with Sage HR and also the employee portal, because the whole point is the interaction between the payroll bureau, the employer in terms of the communication, but also the employees and sharing that information, that cascading information, making sure that they understand their payslip. Do you want to sort of expand in terms of that interaction between payroll, Sage HR, as well as the payslips, and how that's going to be really important going forward?
Yeah, I think what we have learned, and I think it's really important, is engaged employees are happier, more likely to stay, more likely to take notice, and are also more likely to be helpful in terms of when materials need to be supplied to you by deadlines. It's one of those things. But obviously, engagement, how do you keep that engagement up, is a really good question. It's around using the tools you've got at your disposal. So we use Teams a lot, Chris. It's one of those things. Actually, when used really well, it's actually really good, because you can make interactions, you can do questionnaires. Part of that is about making sure that it's not just been sent, but it's been received. So tips around, if you're emailing your employees, make sure they've got a read receipt or ask them to respond and things like that. But what you've just touched on there is, if there are products that will connect into your payroll, or if you use an HR system, or you've got details that where information is held that you want your employees to spend their time, really focus on it. So you talk about Sage HR for our cloud connected customers for their payslips, or our DIY customers. It's a really great place because it's something we're finding employees are spending a regular amount of time. Things that can be used via apps are much more accessible for lots of people than just portals. And if they can be the center of where communications stay, you tend to find that they're really accessible and they're really reused. That's why social media is generally well received in circles, because it's quick and it's snappy and people spend their time there. If you've got a LinkedIn profile, I'm unlikely to be on TikTok, Chris, but LinkedIn absolutely, around things where we're gonna be doing events and things like that, because people are in there on a regular basis and it's immediate and responsive. So it's very much looked at your software, and that's one of the other things I want to talk about. I wanted to mention on here is payroll year end is a really good opportunity for you as professionals to review your software. It's not about, this isn't saying change to Sage. This is review the software you use, whoever it is, and make sure you know everything it can do for you. Because fairly much I can guarantee there'll be 20% of the software you're not anywhere near, and actually there'll be something in there that saves you time. We've got a tool that does checks that tells you that you're overpaying or underpaying based on any parameters you've set in. And it can be really quick. You might just key in 150 rather than 15 hours, and you can correct it down the line. But if you can be stopped at that point in time, it can be really useful. And they're just examples, ones that do data checks for you in advance of people retiring or ending maternity. There's lots of different bits of kit and software. And payroll year end is a great chance to say, well, one, we're going to educate ourselves around payroll and benefits, but actually let's just have a look back at our software. Let's give it a bit of a poke. And if it doesn't do what you need it to do, then maybe it is time to think about other software or asking your suppliers if they've got any plans for that. But it's really important that is the kit that you're using fit for purpose, and have you stretched it? Really be stretching it, because when you get the most from your kit, you'll actually probably get a little bit of time back that'll help you with this. And that's really what it's about, is payroll people always have more work than time, and it will keep going. Payroll benefits is about do more with less. But if you can get a little bit more from your software, a little bit of automation, online pay slips, if you've still got clients that are not online on the pay slips, just push them this year, because you've then not got a repeat pay slip or a repeat P60 question. Be prepared to be a bit bold at payroll year and around this, but really ask your software some serious questions of what can it do.
And I think that's some really good advice there, Steve, because like everything, we get bogged down in the day-to-day work. How many times do you actually, let's say, park a Friday morning to really just focus on the software, look at the updates and get some update training, and go on to the pay slips thing. I see it all the time in the forums where people are still emailing pay slips, and then you basically, I've emailed the wrong pay slip. That just has to stop. And it's so easy to do so with, let's say, the client portals, the mobile applications. It's safe, it's secure, it's easy, and fundamentally, it just saves time. Now, in terms of using software better, we've been discussing the additional costs which businesses are going to be experiencing from April this year. So it's not just payroll costs, but there are other costs in going through. And therefore, it's so important, the fact that actually businesses should actually look at that holistic view of how their business is getting training. And therefore, with the reports from Sage in terms of what the scenarios could look like, it's so important maybe start looking at cash flow forecast reports. So this is where we're really proud of the tools we've got. So we've got a tool called Futurely. So it integrates with your Xeros and your QuickBooks and your Sage Accountings, and very soon your Sage 50. So it's able to do that automatic profit and loss balance sheet cash flow reporting. But then just imagine, then you can start to model these various different, let's say, payroll scenarios. So therefore you can see, let's say, that seasonality, understand the pressures, but more importantly, when you're looking at, say, workforce hiring, and yes, we can see it in the social media, people, let's say, taking a pause in terms of how they're going to hire going forward. What are they going to hire? What are they going to be paying people? Thinking about, should I be outsourcing or not? There's so many conversations. The key thing is, before you make a decision, plan for it. Look at the scenarios, look at the implications, think about what's right. So therefore, it's a case for just thinking, if you need decent cash flow reporting tools, we've got it all there for you. Because really, it's all about understanding the P&L, understanding who your suppliers are costing you, think about the opportunity for, let's say, generating income from other sources as well. So in terms of, let's say, thinking about what else and where, it's a case of actually understanding the pricing and the charges. And it's not just the forecast, it's also the payroll services you're offering. Again, that year-end routine is so important. What effort am I applying to the payroll? What am I, let's say, missing a trick in terms of what am I charging? We've got all these new legislation themes coming forward. It's a case of actually, how am I charging for it? is there a better way of doing so? So really, it's a case of when you're working with Sage, it's the fact that we've got all the tools available, from client management to dealing with anti-money laundering to dealing with the letter of engagement and pricing. So again, if you're thinking about increasing your price of payroll, we've got all the tools you need. So I've touched upon the fact that we've got future cash flow forecasting tools, Sage Business Cloud Payroll. So if you haven't used our native cloud product, our browser-based product, it's all in the cloud. It's brilliant, really easy to use. Basically do payroll in 4 steps. Or if you want to understand more about it, it's a case of if you would like to understand and hear more for, I've just put a little poll up there. So yes, no, not at all, more than happy with that. But I think the whole point is that case of looking at what software is available to make your life easier, and also exploring the opportunities and actually using payroll in the cloud. So the stats are pretty, oh, of course, so many people want to know about Sage Business Cloud Payroll, fantastic. But I will just end that poll now. Thank you very much. So if we come to the end, so I'm going to have a quick look at the Q&A, because I think we did a really good job of handling the Q&A throughout, because I don't really want to deal with, let's say, 100 or so questions all at the end. I'm just going through, yeah, some little queries about that £1 admin charge on the court orders, but everything okay. Sage 50 updates. Yeah, more questions on the benefit in kind, but really the whole point is being aware of it. It is happening from April 2026. Clarity, details, capabilities in the software will all be there. The key thing is tell your clients, the business owners, this is happening. Get them to think about where the information has been stored and how they're going to share information with you. It's all about creating awareness and also creating new habits and behaviors going forward. Now, for those on the webinar today who have a Making Tax Digital for Income Tax theme in their mind. So if you haven't heard, MTD is happening. So from April 2026, if you're a sole trader or a landlord with gross income of more than £50,000, you need to maintain digital records. So like everything, Sage is here. Sage is delivering, honestly, the best roadshows coming out at the end of February. Everything about the understanding technicalities. We'll have HMRC there on the panel. We're going through, let's say, how do you price for this? How do you plan for the 100 days? We'll also bring AI. So it's a really informative day all about MTD. So for those of you who are engagement clients who may be affected by it, you can see on the screen we've got some great locations dotted around the UK. And also, as a case, if you want to get more details, just go on sage.com/UK MTD events, whole landing page, see the speakers, and also register for the events, which are free, as well as you get your CPD. So with that to an end, we're coming to the top of the hour. So first of all, Sarah, thank you so much for your insights and your guidance and the clarity in terms of the detail that is more important. And also, Steve, for your passion, just being there and just letting us know what the software can do. So hopefully everyone has a great day, and thank you all, and hopefully see the next payroll webinar in not too distant to come. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thanks everybody. Happy payroll year end.
Bye.
Bye-bye.